everyone. This is Sydney Otamanchuk from Inside Scientific, the online environment for life science webinars, virtual events, interviews, and educational content that helps you do your best work. Our Real Science sessions focus on connecting with the researchers, educators, and industry professionals from all walks of life that make scientific discovery and innovation possible. Every year, we run a joint webinar series with the American Physiological Society, and this year's focus is on women's health. And so we're also partnering with the Society for Women's Health Research. Our next guest on our podcast today is Dr. Helen Collins, Assistant Professor of Medicine at the University of Louisville in the Center for Cardiometabolic Science, an upcoming speaker in our series who is here to share about her research and why she's passionate about women's health. Thanks for being here with us today. I'd like to start by just asking if you can give us a very short summary of your research.
So the mission of my lab is to investigate mechanisms that underlie female cardiovascular health and resilience, and that's in the setting of both physiological and pathological stress. So in terms of physiological stress, we study how the heart adapts to the demands of pregnancy. And so in those studies, we look at how the heart adapts structurally, functionally, and metabolically to the demands of pregnancy and the postpartum period. And then in some new upcoming studies in my lab, we're looking at sex-dependent changes in cardiovascular remodeling and metabolism in response to a heart attack or myocardial infarction.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. You are a speaker in our upcoming Women's Health webinar series, so I'd like to know how you became first interested in women's health research and what really motivates you to continue in this field.
So that's a great question. So during my PhD and postdoctoral studies, upon reviewing the literature in the field, I noticed that most of the cardiovascular studies had been conducted with male subjects and animals. So I've wanted to not only increase knowledge of what occurs in female cardiovascular physiology, but also to try and bridge that knowledge gap within the field. So we know that many of the female cardiovascular insights that are being made in recent years have alluded to the fact that women are not necessarily just smaller men, but in fact we have different innate cardiovascular changes in comparison to males. We have different cell type distributions in the heart, we have different underlying physiological changes, and a different adaptations to cardiovascular stress. So part of why I want to stay in the field is not only to expand the knowledge in terms of potential female cardiovascular resilience mechanisms, but to also, in terms of my studies focused on pregnancy, to try and make advancements in the field such that we can have a greater understanding of how the female heart adapts during a normal pregnancy, because I'm a great believer that we have to understand what is happening with normal cardiovascular physiology before we can tackle cardiovascular disease. So hopefully insights in my lab will yield advancements in the maternal cardiovascular field such that maybe we could see declines in the high maternal mortality rates that we see in the US today.
Okay, that's really great, and thank you for sharing your own reasons for your passion. You definitely touched on a good point too about a lot of research is done in male mice, for example. So it's really wonderful that you're committed to advancing women's health research. So on that note, what goals really do you have that's related to your work and the improvement of women's health in your specialty?
So in terms of the maternal health aspect of my research, we really want to understand the structural and functional changes that occur in the maternal heart, and also the metabolic changes, because they have been, so as much as women have not participated or been included in research studies, even fewer pregnant women are included in preclinical and clinical studies. So we have even more knowledge that we need to obtain within this population of women. And they're the most vulnerable population of women that we see within society. So we, in the lab, we want to examine the specific metabolic mechanisms that contribute to how, in our studies, we've seen how the heart enlarges during pregnancy, and we know through many studies that we've performed that changes in metabolism are associated with this change in growth of the heart. And as such, also the reversal of this growth is also, we found, associated with reversal of many of those metabolic changes. So we hope to understand those changes so that when we can move into models of pregnancy-associated cardiovascular disease, then we can understand the actual and point at which, or pinpoint, the specific underlying molecular mechanisms and metabolic mechanisms that contribute to the disease, so that potentially they could be targetable in some preclinical studies moving forward. And then in terms of the sex differences studies that we have going on, just to provide not only baseline knowledge of this fundamental differences in cardiovascular biology between men and women, but to also understand why more women have less adverse structural and functional remodeling in response to a heart attack. What are the specific molecular and metabolic mechanisms that contribute? So we have several avenues that we're looking into now for both of those lines of research, and we're hoping to then incorporate more female cardiovascular disease-specific models into our repertoire.
Yeah, it's fascinating, all of the changes that occur in a woman during pregnancy, but those changes don't always result in necessarily a good outcome. So yeah, that's I think it's really fascinating that you study that in particular.
Yeah.
So can you let us know what some of your unique challenges are when you're conducting research specifically on sex differences in cardiovascular physiology and in the context of women's health?
So in terms of some of the unique challenges that we face with regard to studying sex differences in the cardiovascular field, I alluded to some of them. Is the body of research that we have has been heavily focused on males. So we and other investigators in the field are effectively playing a decade of catch-up with respect to what we need to know to then effectively target female-specific cardiovascular diseases. So with respect to the sex differences that we see, is there are, even before any onset of disease, there are programmed differences in all of the different cell types in the heart between males and females, such that we see sex differences even at the cellular level all the way up to the organ level. So teasing apart some of those factors in terms of research is somewhat tricky. And then also trying to time the contributions of sex-specific hormones and tease apart their specific impact in addition to innate chromosomal and epigenetic changes that are just programmed at the cellular level. That becomes tricky. Also, in terms of the wider field, the problem is not many females are recruited into preclinical and clinical studies. So this means that even now, even with the encouragement of the sex as a biological variable by many journals and research agencies, some investigators still don't include females in their research. So trying to increase inclusion of females into both preclinical and clinical studies would be of wider benefit to all of research. Most of the time they're excluded from research based on complexities perceived with hormonal cycling, but also the fact that because women are largely protected, in the premenopausal stage for many cardiovascular diseases, they don't often show any kind of cardiovascular phenotype. But such studies that have focused on cardiovascular disease in postmenopausal animals has yet to fully tease out those mechanisms either, most likely based on the innate cellular differences that I described.
Yeah, that's quite shocking that it's such a wide range of differences all the way down, like you said, cellular up to organ systems. But I have heard before that what you mentioned about the reason that females aren't necessarily included tend to be the complication of the hormones, or they perceive it as complicated. So to me, it's a puzzle that I would think more people would be interested in solving. So, and you're one of the ones who are tackling it. So thank you again for your contributions. So Helen, I would love to get your opinion on how public health policies could better support research and researchers like yourselves that aim to improve women's health outcomes.
So I think what we must first do is increase education amongst women. And the reason I say this is because men and women have different cardiovascular symptoms in response to, for example, a heart attack. And most women are not really familiar with those symptoms. They're also, because many more men have heart attacks than women are not aware of the risks associated with them having a heart attack. So increasing awareness of cardiovascular disease in women, also especially pregnant women. So a lot of women are not aware of the fact that they could have a pregnancy-associated cardiovascular disease. So I think first we have to increase awareness amongst women. If we do that, then we'll be able to then successfully recruit women to clinical studies, because then they'll be aware of the benefit that this increased knowledge will have, not only amongst women, but just in general across the board. And then also I think that more initiatives with regard to funding women's health and women's health-based initiatives would be beneficial. And this would also feed into some of the increased education and then inclusion of women in studies. Aside from that, I think we should also think about even including women in more of the decision-making process, so that some of their, for example, with me, with reading the journals, it would have been nice back when I was doing that to be included and have some say about including females in research strategies more so, and having a seat at the table to make decisions on women's health is only of benefit.
I really loved all the points that you touched on. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. To close out with this interview today, is there anything that you would like the public to better understand about women's health that tends to be overlooked or misunderstood?
There are a couple of things. So I think I slightly touched upon this in my previous answer, but I think women have to be aware of cardiovascular symptoms and be at some point self-advocating if you feel like a symptom is not a usual symptom that you have, seek medical attention. But I think we have to start by increasing awareness amongst women, because I think if we know the just the lack of knowledge that is out there with regard to our cardiovascular health. This would, I think, motivate some women to join clinical studies, but it would also motivate other people in the field to study female cardiovascular physiology more so, because I feel like we need more people on board to tackle women's health, because it's alarming that although in general women are more likely to fare well from a cardiovascular remodeling perspective in terms of MI, women are actually more likely to die from a heart attack than men. And this is because they don't seek treatment after a heart attack because they're not familiar with the symptoms. And they also, I learned this recently from the American Heart Association, that a lot of people are less inclined to administer CPR to women as well. So when we do have heart attacks, we don't know the symptoms, and then we put off going to the ER because many of the symptoms are such that they are those which we would maybe associate with normal ailments, like nausea and indigestion, rather than the typical chest pain, pain in the arm that is seen with men. So if you could, I guess if I was to give a takeaway message, my message is women are not just smaller men. We have different innate physiological properties than men, and we respond and handle stress differently to men.
Love that. That's a great answer. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. In particular, I like what you said about women needing to be more aware of the symptoms. And again, like you said, they're different from men's. But I think also part of the fear of going to get medical help is sometimes that it's brushed off, perhaps, because it could be considered normal every day. Oh, that's normal for you today because you didn't eat enough or something like that. So I think also medical providers need to do a better job of really listening to when a woman says she feels like something is wrong, because often something is wrong. So Helen, thank you so much for being with us today, sharing your research and your thoughts with us. It was a really pleasure to have you with us, and I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Thank you for having me, and I really enjoyed this and discussing women's health with you all.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Real Science and that you'll tune in to future episodes where scientists, just like you, answer questions about their life, their work, and share insights into what it's like to be doing real science. Don't forget to subscribe.